Music too loud? Can someone turn the music down?
Thank you. That was fast. You're fast.
Anyway, Marty always had some quick quips all the time, and I know right now, if he were looking, he is looking down. He's saying to himself, "What's the dude with the Sergeant Preston trail goggles doing, talking at my funeral?" And I don't even know who Sergeant Preston is. Some people do. It was the show back in the 50s, maybe. Anyway, that's my surgery. So when I'm in the light room, I have to put these glasses. That's what makes the Sergeant Preston goggles. Marty had my dad had a bunch of sayings. The one that he's probably he had the most frequency of use is Jiminy Christmas. He would always be saying Jiminy Christmas all the time. He also would frequently, if we're in a restaurant or someplace, food wasn't good, he would say, "This would put Superman in the grave."
Breath, especially breath.
That was his line. I like that. The other thing that he did a lot, and I didn't know there was a reference, but I'm sure it means something, but someone would be flying by us in the car and goes, "Oh, it's Lorenzo Bandini." That means you're a fast driver. And he liked auto racing. He had a chance to meet a couple famous auto racers, Emerson Fittipaldi, and then Buddy Lazier. Buddy Lazier actually lived in a condo near their place they had in Colorado, so they got to actually know each other. And Buddy Lazier always loved Ritter the dog, loved Ritter the shepherd. He'd come over and pet him, and it was kind of cool to have an Indy 500 winner always, "Oh, there's Ritter, Ritter's in town." So my dad loved that. He loved Ritter, and he loved him. That German shepherd was part of our kids when they were growing up, would always be around Ritter, riding Ritter like a horse, or taking pictures. He was just a gentle giant. Another thing that's unique about my dad, not real sure what the origin is, but he loved anything around Detroit. His favorite team was the Detroit Lions. He loved Bob Seger from Detroit. Michigan State, he just loves Michigan State. I don't know if we know why, but he always loved Michigan State. He's a huge Husker fan, and the Huskers first, but you'd see him wearing a Michigan State hat, so he liked Detroit. The other thing that I would just say, and kind of finished with, is he was very involved in the community. It really rubbed off on us to be, just involved and engaged with the community. He cared a lot about Lincoln. He was involved in a lot of different things. He helped start a business group in the late 70s called Lincoln Independent Business Association, which Debbie's here, and she's still actively involved. I think pretty much for every year it was between Debbie and my dad on who got the newest and most members.
Yeah, that was a big deal. That was a big race.
A big membership board, and my dad's like, Debbie's ahead of me.
Debbie's got me again.
It was like this horse race to see the most new members, and did a lot for that organization. So just really proud of what he did, and I think I'm just going to wrap it up with that. I have more comments, but I'm going to let myself not get broken up here. But we are going to have a few more people talk.
Introduce Van
is next, representing the grandkids. Where's Van? Van
probably got a big mouthful of lasagna. I think he was.
I would say one other thing too, that my dad's favorite holiday was most likely April Fool's, because the guy was a prankster. Always was pulling tricks on us. April Fool's would roll around, and we're always like, "What's going to happen today?" Something was going to happen, because he was quite the prankster. So, Dad, here's grandson William Marty Osbender.
Thanks for throwing in the whole name. I knew my grandpa very differently than most people did. I didn't go to Levi or any of those things, but I did know him as my grandpa. When I was a little kid, we'd go out to the lake all the time, and we'd spend the summer out with Grandma and Papa Marty, and we'd swim all day. We'd sprint down, we'd jump off the dock to see who could get out the farthest, or make the biggest splash, or we'd go out in a little red golf cart, drive around with all of them. And every year we'd sit together outside the garage on the 4th of July, and we'd just all sit and watch the fireworks blast off from the distance. And all of these things were vital to our childhood. We loved our grandpa, but nothing quite compared to the start of my day, each day over the summer when I was little. I would go out in the back and I'd find Papa sitting in his soaked pajamas, watching the sunrise. And so he'd be sitting there with his black coffee, and I'd be sitting there with my Pop-Tart. And we didn't say much, you know. We'd sit in silence and we'd just watch the orange streams of light come out over the sunrise, and we watched it beam off onto the water, and all the beavers jumping out on the water, and fish or whatever. You know, it was nice. You know, it was one of the few times in the day I get to spend just with my grandpa. But you know, like everything, our time would end. We'd go on about our days. I know my grandpa was a good man. You know, he stands as a symbol for everything I strive for. He was determined, and he was thoughtful, and he had boundless knowledge. And he was funny too. I remember on my 5th birthday, I had a costume party. Everybody came dressed up, and I thought none of the adults would dress up. And I come around the corner, and sitting at the table is Papa Marty dressed up as Zorro. But instead of carving a Z into the wall, he carved an M for Marty. That made me giggle. I miss my grandpa. People always say to cherish family because you never really know how much time you have left with them. And I thought I knew this and I understood this. You know, typical. You see this in movies. I watch movies all the time. I'm sure you all do. And I didn't really process the notion. Not until he left. And I'm so fortunate to have had the time to visit with him and Grandma while they were in over at Bickford, whether it was here in Lincoln or in Grand Island. Being able to end my day every week or two, leave college and stop by and see how they're doing, talk, visit. It was like a warm light in a cold room. It was nice, and you know, like the sunrise, I knew it would end sooner or later. I just didn't realize it would be sooner rather than later. And my grandpa gave me the sight to see little things in life. You know, if you don't stop and look around once in a while, you might miss it. Anybody catch that? That movie reference? You know, while I was with him, it was impossible not to see it all. Things won't really quite be the same without his presence. I can't help but feel something's missing. He's not around, sitting on the back patio. But, you know, goodbyes aren't forever. And I know someday we'll look out at the sunrise again.
Good job.
I don't know who'll hand the top.
Good job, man.
Thanks, Pam. Really nice. Our next, we're going to have Russ come up and speak. I believe that's our next proof on the line.
Yeah. Thanks, Russ.
Russ was supposed to have been told by me that he was going to make some remarks. And,
At the visitation last night, I go, I'm so excited you're coming and doing a tribute. And he's like, I was like, uh-oh, you don't know anything about that, do you? Uh-oh. So thanks, Russ.
I would like to just say, these guys all had a bunch of funny nicknames. Russ, I don't know what your nickname was, but we've got people in the room. Dieter is here. Craig Huey Dodge was someone. My dad, I found out his nickname was Digger, I guess. I got told that by someone because he worked at
Wilbur Sons. Oh, that makes sense, doesn't it?
Some meeting, and I'm talking to, he's a former county commissioner. He goes, you know, we called your dad Digger because he worked at a funeral or something. Funeral home. So didn't know that. There's a bunch of funny nicknames. But Russ, I don't have a nickname for you. I'm just going to say Russ Bear.
It's fair.
Thank you very much. Well, let me just say it's certainly an honor to speak.
Thanks.
I mean, it really is. I haven't done this, and frankly, I haven't talked to a group of people in quite a few years. But Dodge and Marty called me RB because they were big into football. My initials are RB.
Oh.
But it wasn't for Russ Bear. It was for running back.
Oh.
So that's the only thing I know. But listen, found out about last night. There's a lot of things to talk about. I won't be as humorous as some of the things that came up here. And then about 4 o'clock this morning, I thought it came to me.
Really?
So I woke up and I said, sometimes you don't look back on life soon enough, you know? And so this gave me an opportunity to think about Marty and what he meant to me personally. I don't know if I was supposed to talk about Eastern or something else.
No
I think
parameters.
folks are gonna stop me. And I've known Marty for 53 years. He took this 19-year-old that was looking for a job because I thought one day I might want to do something in healthcare and hired me out there. And so he was my first boss, my first real boss that scared the hell out of me. But he was also a teacher, so that was sort of cool too. And the boss thing changed over the years. The teacher thing never really changed a whole lot. But he was a weird sense of humor. I mean, he in that first couple of years that I knew Marty and worked at that time Eastern Nebraska Ambulance Service, and this is 73, 74, 75, something like that. You'd get into a car with him and he would drive you there, and I think Doug may be talking some more about some of this, and I'm not going to take away anything other than I wasn't sure if I was going to be alive when I got to the end of the when Marty was driving that. And then one time, the first time, there weren't many people like to do a particular call, and the first time that Marty came up to me and he said, "Hey Bear, we're going to go just code 2, red lights, the sirens and stuff like that." And I said, "Great." Thought it was going to be something important. We pull up to a house, there's no one else there, and that was my first call. And the first call, in case you're wondering, was the first call a funeral home made when they picked up a dead body.
Oh.
And Marty loved it.
Oh, jeez.
I bet you I went on 50 first calls with that guy. But he was great with people. I mean, he had that face and that calmness, and that was one of the most important things I think I learned from Marty is how to react in a sort of tough situation. And so for that, I'll always remember him. So first he was my boss and teacher, and then he became our friend. Cheryl and Marty really took Gwen and I under their wings. I got stationed in Germany, young married couple. In fact, Kirsten is 2 days younger than my daughter Jenny, and they came over to visit us. First visitors we had, we'd never been outside of Nebraska or even Missouri, but they came over, and it was like the relief of the world went off of Gwen and I, because we actually saw familiar faces, and Cheryl was missing you. I don't know why I wasn't missing Scott.
Oh.
She was missing you.
You was his favorite. You was the favorite.
Well, she was holding Jenny the whole time.
Oh.
For a week and a half, we didn't have to touch her. But then when I got out of the service, and Marty had said early on, he said, "If you ever are thinking about something, think about coming back to us." And so I came, and we weren't sure what we were going to do. And Marty said, "You're hired on the spot if you want a job." Wow. They found our first home for us together, and they really became friends. And you know what? That's what he did to almost all of his employees. And if that was the second thing I learned from him, is treat your employees like they're your family and your friends, and life goes so well. and he was, of course, 100% correct. I came back, and so we're now back in the early 80s. I'll get through the next 30 years really quick.
Oh.
But in the early 80s, and Marty and I went to paramedic school. And I learned from him on that a lot. I learned you always want to be able to do whatever you ask your employees to do. And that was really critically important. And I also learned that if you stuck a needle into Marty, he'd pass out.
Oh yeah. Oh legit.
I had
Yeah.
the opportunity that he was my dummy when I was starting IVs at paramedic school, and here he was still my boss, by the way, and just boom on the floor, and I thought, okay, killed my partner, my partner in the paramedic school. We were not the first two nationally registered paramedics in Nebraska, but I think we may have been the only two that never treated a patient. We never went on an ambulance call as paramedics. We did some ride-alongs as paramedics. But the whole citizenry should thank the fact that Marty and I never as a paramedic. But what he then really became for me, and this is sort of the term that popped into my head over, Scott got a hold of me last week when he passed, and he was really my entrepreneurial mentor. I mean, here's a guy, and you've already heard, and I think Debbie's gonna talk a little bit about Leva, but he saw the value of small businesses and focused everything he could do to make small businesses successful. And and he would always say 80% of the employees in the world are employed by small businesses, not large corporations, small businesses. So you gotta take care of your employees and take care of the small businesses that hire them. And so that was the next thing that he was for me. So he's been a boss and a teacher and a friend and a mentor. And then by many acts of God, I believe, we were able to become partners. And we became partners in so many different things. And that was a blast. I have to honestly tell you, he drove me badass crazy.
Oh, I bet.
He would call us into his office, and Mike Dodge and I, and he'd say, well, why don't we start an ambulance service in Omaha? We're barely surviving in Lincoln, Nebraska. 2 calls a day, but we had great people with us everywhere we went. And then he wanted to go to Grand Island and start in Grand Island, and it was always coming in, and Mike and I had offices near his, and we would just shake our heads when Marty would say, can you guys come in and talk? But it was great. He was that kind of leader. He had a vision for what needed to be done. And all of the great things we did in the ambulance world, and there's some you may not even remember or even knew about. Flavor One, does anybody remember Flavor One? Flavor One was an ice cream company we were involved with for a little while, until the doctor that put the recipe together went crazy, and then that was over.
Oh, yeah.
But
Do you
I was
remember
talking
that?
to Tina wherever Tina's at right now.
Oh, Tina.
Hi, Tina. BQ Bones. Anybody remember BQ Bones?
Yeah.
BQ Bones was a barbecue restaurant that we started. Had the cutest little figurine. And I have the recipes, because after we fired the cook and that sort of went downhill, we said, well, the one thing you have to do is give me all the recipes. And so he gave us the recipes. And it's just, that was Marty. And that's all I'll remember always, that guy took me from a 19-year-old to a 74-year-old, 73-year-old now. But I'll always remember what he did for me in my life. So, sorry if that was too personal.
No, no.
He was a good guy.
Can you come sit in here?
No, I'm good.
Doug, what?
Where's Van? Make the boys sit in here. They can't
Well, I
hear.
should probably let Mike Stewart go ahead of me because he was there before I was. But little story, when I went to get my first job in Lincoln after I left York, Nebraska, at the ripe old age of 18 to go to Nebraska Wesleyan, my mom and dad said, first year you can't have a job. I had a job all through high school, worked for the ambulance service, got my EMT at the age of 16, if that doesn't scare you. But I get here at 18, 19 rolls around. I finished my freshman year at Wesleyan, and my brother-in-law was working at this place called Eastern Ambulance. And he said, you know what, we're short-handed, and we got the state fair going on, and there's a lot of standbys during the season. I think you could get a job. It's like, okay, that's fine. Well, one thing I didn't do is I didn't do my research before I went in for the interview. I'm a young kid, I don't know anything. So I pull up, and one of the things about Marty is he was a competitor, okay? He would compete. And he had several years of another public service that was trying to take over the private service. And I think everybody knows what that was.
Yeah.
I came from a background of, I was a junior firefighter. And I pull up in the back of Eastern Ambulance, and I pull in, and Marty's office used to sit back there at 42nd Vine Street where he would look out the back. And I learned this later, but I think he said, who in the hell is that? On the back of my bumper, 1973 Buick Riviera, was firefighters fight fires and save lives. Well, I came in and Mike came around the corner and he said, I'm back here. My interview was with Mike. Marty wasn't there. But I believe to this day that Mike hired me to just get at Marty a little bit. But no, in reality, Marty, like Russ, at that age, he taught me so much. He taught me about, life, about what it means to serve people and how to treat people. We didn't just run ambulance calls, we took care of people. And that was very important to your dad. I think that came from the funeral home business. Whatever he did, he cared about people, and he cared about his employees. And I know that one thing, you hear God, you hear family, and you hear country. And those three things you hear a lot. But Marty taught free enterprise. He taught independence. He taught about private and how that can make a big difference. It brings a relationship to you. So the last thing I have is a little bit of what Russ was talking about. I remember one of my first calls with Marty, and I think this was probably to try and prove myself a little bit. But we had a bell that kind of rang, and we knew we had a call. And so it's my turn, and I'm paired up with Marty. And of course, as a young buck, you don't get behind the wheel. Marty's getting behind the wheel. Okay. We get into the ambulance, and there's a picture over here, and there's one in the service. But those ambulances, you get in there, and there were radios, there was a siren, there was an ashtray. And your job as the attendant was to get into the map book, make sure you knew where you were going. And so we had the address. I'm in the map book, I'm looking. The next thing I look up, we're out the drive. We dip down in, we're off, we're code 3, lights and sirens. I'm looking over, and here's Marty. He's got a cup of coffee, he's got a cigarette, got a wheel. Not only that, the guy grabs the radio, tells them we're en route. There's only one radio, there's 2 radios. We have these things slid all over the place. And I'm looking, I'm going, oh my. We did that time and time again. You always felt safe when you were with Marty. He taught me a lot about things, and he also brought Kathy and I, when we got married, we became part of the Miller family too. So that's just part of the Millers. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
The only time I ever got an ambulance was to clean one, and I drove it through the garage, and that was the last time.
That was the last time.
Bar right off, and I think I still had a job, but I quit washing and doing anything with the ambulance. So the next person will say a few words. A dear friend of mom and dad, just been a saint. Been out to see them, I don't know how many times every year. It seems like every time, I'm going to go out to see your parents. Oh, that's so nice. Very right on. So Debbie Brown has been a long-time friend. I'll let her talk about her relationship with my dad.
Thanks, Scott. As he said, my name is Debbie Brim, and I met Marty in 1983, a long time ago. Because in 1980, he was one of the 11 founders of LIBA, the Lincoln Independent Business Association. So those of you that know about LIBA know everything, but those that don't, it was small business answer to all the anti-business rhetoric that was coming out of the city. And Marty was one of the 11 founders. And I thought that was great that when I joined, my father had heard about LIBA and said, why don't you get involved with it? Because you represent small business. And at the time, our business was Douglas Theater Company. And Marty took me under his wing immediately. He always did that for new members. He liked to make people feel comfortable. Didn't matter if you were 20 years old, if you were 40 years old, if you were 60 years old. It didn't matter to him. He really enjoyed making people feel welcome when they came into LIBA and made them had to go to committees with him, which is what I did a lot of, and because we hit it off. And he really became my mentor in the organization, which I thought was really great. But then he also started bringing Cheryl to the monthly luncheons, and so then Cheryl and I became very close friends as well. And when Marty, Cheryl, and I became close friends, and not just at LIBA events. We enjoyed having dinner together quite often, and we always celebrated our birthdays. Marty always would bring a birthday cake to one of our LIBA committees, and we'd eat it and share it with all the committee members. And I have to tell you, my birthday was January 26th, and it was so great. I happened to miss this phone call, and I'm really glad that I did, because Marty and Piper and Kristen called and sang happy birthday to me. And since I missed the call, it's on voicemail, and I still have it. So I get to listen to it, and I can hear his voice. I just think that's just the nicest thing. I enjoyed watching Marty's kids grow up. He and Cheryl enjoyed watching mine grow up. We just became like close friends as family, which was great. But one of Marty's favorite activities was visiting the old, long-forgotten cemeteries. And some of you talked about that. But he would come back and he'd tell me all about all these headstones that he'd seen. But it was so interesting because my son Garrett would hear this, and when we'd go to a couple cemeteries, Garrett, they would run and look at headstones, and when Marty does this, so he'd go and look at him, so I think that was something that rubbed off on Garrett that I thought was a pretty good trait, too. But Marty loved Big Red football, and my family always enjoyed taking him and Cheryl to some of the games. He loved German Shepherds, especially Ritter. The sisters of Ritter over here. And Marty really liked it when I would call him to remind him when the Westminster Kennel Club dog show was on television, because he had to turn it on to watch the German Shepherds that were in the show pen. He loved politics. He worked on several campaigns for pro-business candidates. He's appreciated by many elected officials because he would do everything. He'd go door to door, he'd make phone calls, he'd hand out literature, he'd walk in parades. That's what we were all doing. And then Marty was just as involved in political campaigns as he was in anything for LIBA. Because always a pro-business candidate, because that's what he believed in. With people that supported small business. But it was, but he always relied on me to keep him informed as to what TV show was on, what political events going on, what social events we have coming up, when the LIBA meetings, luncheons, etc. All this he wanted me to tell him. So every day we'd have to talk what was going on that day. He loved to write everything down, but then he'd forget where he wrote it until he called me up. But Marty and I continued to help grow the membership of LIBA. And as Scott was saying, we had kind of a contest. I was Ian. But there was over 144 members on our torch board, which I think is pretty exciting. And all the years that he was involved, because that was good. It was a highlight of it. But when he became too frail to attend the meetings, I would stop by and see him at the assisted living and tell him what was going on at LIBA, because he wanted to know that. And usually when I would stop by, I would always bring 2 pieces of banana cream pie. Because that was his favorite, and Cheryl liked it too. And when I'd stop by for dinner, I would usually go to Tasty's trailer, because the one thing that Marty loved were the Tasty burgers. Because he grew up with college, that's what put him through college, with a 10-cent burger that Tasty had, and to this day, he just loved it. So they have a food trailer now because that store is closed, and so I would stop by and get Tasties and bring it for dinner, so we'd have those together. So he liked that. But I do want to tell you something that I think is really fun. At the annual auction that LIBA has, this is what we have to raise money. And this is, if an item wasn't getting an opening bid, or Marty didn't think it was selling for enough, he would bid it up in hopes that somebody would get behind and keep bidding. He'd bid it up. Well, unfortunately, half the time his tactics failed. And so he'd end up bringing home many items. But one thing I'll never forget, he bought a sailboat
Oh.
that he didn't want. Kirsten may have wanted it.
I mean-
But I know that Marty didn't. They got a sailboat, they had a garden bench, they got a wheelchair, they got obviously, nobody needed it at the time, but he was bidding them up and nobody said, no thanks, go ahead, Marty. And so he probably ended up with about 10 different items in the 10 years of doing auctions. It was so much fun. We laughed about that for days. But again, Marty was one of my best friends. I will really miss him. And thank you, I'm very honored to be asked.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Debbie, and last but certainly not least is Mike Stewart. Mike, you may have, if you were at the ceremony, saw him in all of the very ornate garb. It was a burger that is something that was very special to my dad, was having, he really liked what's called the Right One service, which is traditional, lots of traditional words thrown in there that are from a long time ago, and Mike was kind enough to be our burger at the service, so I'm going to turn over to Mike.
Thanks, Scott. So many great memories that I've heard over the last week. Scott and I were communicating back and forth via email. Kirsten and I spent probably an hour on the phone last week. And I told her some stories, some of which I'm going to relate here. But first and foremost, Marty was my boss. Like Russ, mine was 51 years ago.
Oh.
Marty became my boss. And I was a little afraid of him too, in the beginning. And what Doug talked about, the nice thing about the Cadillacs, they had a big flat dash. So you could set a cup of coffee on the dash. And as Doug said, the ashtray was always out, and you'd be driving code 3. Everything Doug says is true, but he never spilled a drop of coffee. Ever. Some of the fun things, and I shared this with Van and Scott, I think you were in the room this morning before the service. Once in a while, we'd have a slow afternoon, and we'd play Risk. That's one of the things that came back. And Risk makes Monopoly look like a quick game. I mean, it is long and involved. And one of the things that came to mind is we were playing Risk one afternoon. It's got this huge board, and it's the world. And somebody would be getting ready to attack Marty's country. And all of a sudden they'd be building troops and armaments along the border. And I remember sitting there, and Marty's like, what could this mean? Such good memories, though. One of the things that Marty and I worked together, and he was my boss for like 19 or 20 years. But one of the things that really brought us together was the Episcopal Church. And one of the things that Marty used to do, they were at Holy Trinity then, Marty would buy tickets to the Shrove Tuesday pancake feed at Holy Trinity. And so all of the employees went to Holy Trinity and ate pancakes and sausage on Marty. And I was intrigued a little bit. And Marty and Cheryl invited me to church one Sunday. And so I went to church with them. Now, this is a kid that was raised a Methodist with a mother who was a former Roman Catholic that left the church for all of the wrong reasons. So there weren't many of my Methodist colleagues that knew about Hail Marys and Our Fathers and rosaries and novenas, etc. So Marty takes me to the Episcopal Church. And I go in and I'm like, this all makes sense now. Spiritual gymnastics, up, down, kneel, that type of thing. And so Marty is probably chiefly responsible for me being an Episcopalian. And we've shared a lot over the years as far as the Episcopal Church. Scott and Mike were acolytes at my wedding. I served as a verger. I don't remember when Kirsten's wedding.
Yeah.
But Marty, when Stacy and I got married at Holy Trinity, Marty was heavily involved in making sure the service was just right. And we had incense at our wedding. Now, so I mean, it was high church. It was a great time. And that's kind of what we bonded over for years and years and years and years and years. And Kirsten and I, when we were talking on the phone, I know this comes as a shock, but Marty had really pre-planned his funeral to details. And she talked about a note that he had left, and Scott, I think you mentioned this too, that he didn't want just a standard cross in his service. He wanted a crucifix. And Kirsten's telling me that, and I said, I know which cross he wanted. Because he would come to the cathedral quite often. And this is probably 15, maybe 20 years ago, we were standing at the back of the nave at Trinity Cathedral, and just shooting the breeze, and I had the cross, the processional cross. And he asked me kind of in passing, he said, you suppose they'd ever loan this out? I said, what do you mean? And I said, he asked me, he said, do you think this could be used at my funeral? And I said, well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And so when Kirsten and I had this discussion, I said, I know what cross he's talking about. And so that's the cross that was in the funeral service today. It's the processional cross from Trinity Cathedral. And then they asked me to be the verger, and I was very, very honored. A lot has been said about Marty. He was kind of like a father image to me. I mean, I learned a lot from that guy. I remember going on ambulance calls, and years ago we had to wear ties like this. and so you're always very careful when you would pick little old ladies up at the hospital to go to the nursing home. You were very, very gentle, and one of the things that just used to get Marty going is that these little old ladies would be afraid they were going to fall, and they'd grab hold of his tie like this, and they'd be choking him, and he's like... But, over the last week, lots and lots of good memories. We heard a lot about what he meant as a father and a grandfather, but he was a father image to us at Eastern, and we'll miss him a great deal. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thanks so much, Mike. On behalf of all the whole family, really appreciate everyone coming out and sharing time with us. Appreciate Mother Claire, Father Steve, Chris up as our organist. Thank you very much. And there's a lot of food left. Take as much as you would like. We have plenty. And you're welcome to stay around. We're going to be around for a little while longer. So